Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Stengel. You know, in your opening comments, you talked about two broad goals that you have in terms of coordinating anti-ISIL message and then amplifying the voices of third parties that are trying to coordinate and counter the ISIL message. I'd like to focus a little bit on that second broad goal. I do think, you know, broadly in the United States as well as across the Muslim world, the vast majority of folks reject ISIL's message and want to counter that. That said, you know, there are mechanisms of using social media and communicating in real time and building the message. You know, the imams in the United States may not be very adept at using social media, right? They may go on a blog, and in our prior hearing, you know, we talked about some of the difficulties that, you know, traditional anti-ISIL Islamic groups and third parties who want to counter may not be adept at, you know, countering in real time that message, building that relationship. And, you know, what are some strategies that we can use along with technology companies that understand how to use these newer technologies to make them more effective in countering the message?
Yes, Congressman, thank you. It reminds me of the famous Mark Twain quote about the lie going around the world in the time that it takes the truth to tie its shoes. The truth being these mainstream Muslim clerics who take the time to read the Quran, take the time to read the Hadith, and don't necessarily have an expertise in social media the way some of the bad guys do. So one of the ideas that we've discussed, and the chairman alluded to it earlier, is there a private sector foundation or NGO of content creators, people who can help content creators, who can help the imam in Detroit to get on Twitter, who can help some of these voices get out there? Because what we've seen, and I've seen this in the Middle East, there's often a reticence among the good guys to be out there, and we need to get them out there, and we need to give them the skill set to be out there.
And, you know, as someone who is not of the generation, you know, when I think about my daughter, think about our younger staff members, they'll roll their eyes when I talk about, you know, how I communicate on social media, because it evolves so quickly. And I think it's more than just training those scholars and third-party individuals, but it's probably partnering with them to take those messages and in very real time continually communicate and counter ISIL messaging in real time, and using the same tools that ISIL probably is using better than we are. So that would be one point. You touched on something else that certainly is of concern and came up in our prior hearing as well. As Twitter starts to take down a lot of these handles, as Facebook starts to take down these messages, we are, as you alluded to previously, starting to see folks go to apps like Telegram that are much more encrypted and much more difficult to monitor. That is certainly some concern, because as we're trying to counter message, you know, those apps become much more difficult. What are some strategies that you know, we might be able to work on?
It's an area that we're just beginning to explore, this migration onto encrypted platforms. And again, as I mentioned, the good news about it is they're reaching much smaller audiences, but they are using it as tools of violence and violent acts, not so much about persuading according to the ideology. And we also know, again, not to be pessimistic about it, that the ability to create encrypted platforms is something that is becoming more widespread itself, so that people are going to be able to do that in the field. And I'm happy to talk more about that in a different setting where it would be appropriate, but I share your concerns.
Right. And then in my brief remaining time, in our prior hearing, you know, we're certainly talking about countering the message online, but in our prior hearing, we also had discussion about using traditional media tools, right? Using Hollywood, using movies to counter a narrative. Again, you know, in the Middle East as well as in certain ethnic communities, they'll consume television, they'll consume movies, and what are our strategies to continue to put out an anti-ISIL message, an anti-radical ideology message? And that's one that I certainly think we ought to be doing a little bit more
Yes, I mean, as you know, Congressman, the most powerful and comprehensive platform in the Middle East is satellite TV. It's not social media. And just during this past Ramadan, which is like sweep weeks for television, Middle East Broadcasting, which is led by a brilliant man named Ali Jaber, did a series called Selfie 2. Selfie 1 was a satirical, comedic exploration that satirized ISIL and made fun of ISIL. This Ramadan was the most successful and the most watched program in the Middle East. This is the kind of thing that we applaud. We had Ali at a retreat at Sunnylands that I mentioned earlier for content makers from Hollywood and the Middle East, and that's the kind of thing that I think, again, will actually win this war of narratives.
Great. And I'm out of time. I'll yield back.